All right, welcome everybody. Hope you're excited to get started. My name's Meg. I'm part of Power to Fly's virtual hosting team, and I'm so excited to be hosting today's chat with Bindu from Facebook. Now, before we get started, I just want to highlight for all of you, maybe if you haven't joined us for a chat and learn before, what you see in front of you is some quick housekeeping. So what we are going to, kind of highlight first is that participation is so amazing and absolutely encouraged. All of you took time out of your day to be here with us live. No offense to anybody that's watching this from the future. Sorry you weren't here for the live recording. But if you're here and you want to participate, we want to encourage that. So you can do it in a couple different ways. You can turn your cameras on if you would like. If you do come off mute for any reason, you will show up on the live recording of today's session as well as the live stream. But if you have any kind of privacy issues or just don't want to show up on camera, that's fine. You can always participate by putting questions or comments into the Zoom chat. And if you have any questions you would like to raise anonymously, not a problem. Just DM me. You'll find me in the drop-down menu under Meg Alexander. Now, like I did say, today's session is being recorded. So in about 1 to 2 business days, everybody that registered will get an email with a link to where they can rewatch the recording. Now, you'll get that if you registered and stayed for 5 minutes, if you stayed for the full 60, if you jumped in and out, or if you registered but didn't manage to join us during today's live session. So don't sweat that. But if Bindu says something today that you just cannot wait to share with a coworker or friend or a relative, you don't have to. You can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'll share the link to that in the group chat in just a little bit. But one thing to know there is that you can head there and check out a huge archive of a bunch of our past chats. And it's a really great way to share that information if you don't want to wait the 1 to 2 days. I also recommend that you follow us on YouTube. It's a great way to make sure that you don't miss great events like today without worrying if maybe you didn't register in time or you can't check one more email in your inbox. So don't sweat it. You can always follow us there. We are also on various social media accounts. We are at Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And like I said, if you have any questions for the speaker today, or even just like troubleshooting questions, please feel free. You can always DM me in the chat, and that way I can try and help you as best I can. Now, before we meet our speaker today, I just want to highlight real fast that Facebook, which is obviously transitioning into the business name of Meta, as I'm sure a bunch of you have heard, they are hiring. So if you check out their page on powertofly.com, I'm going to grab the link here for you. It's going to look much like what you're seeing in front of you right now. Now, if you go to that page, what you can do there is you can find out a little bit more about Meta, formerly Facebook. You can check out the Facebook Insights library. That's got a bunch of past chats that Facebook has partnered on with us, as well as check out some of their almost 6,500 jobs they have posted with us. So definitely take advantage of that. You can also follow them there. There'll be a big pink button at the top top right of the page. Clicking that follow button makes sure that they know that you're interested even before you fill out an application, but it's also going to keep you posted when they put up new roles. So if you're interested in working with Meta, formerly Facebook, then definitely click that follow button. It does a lot of really great things for you. Now, to get us to our speaker today, Bindu is the group TPM at Meta, working on growing e-commerce through connecting buyers and sellers on the Facebook marketplace. Now, she's been in the tech sector for over 20 years as a product and engineering leader. She previously was the VP of technology at Zulily, leading a team of 90 engineers and product managers responsible for building high-scale technology products. Now, Bindu is passionate about building seamless customer experiences, mentoring women in technology, mentoring startups through Techstars, and Bindu has also worked extensively in e-commerce, media, consumer, server, and service spaces. Tara is asking if TPM means technical product manager, and I do believe so. So Bindu, please feel free to correct me on that if I'm wrong. Now, last but not least, Bindu has a master's in chemical engineering from Colorado State University and a BTech in chemical engineering from Andhra University in India. Now, when she's not at work, Bindu enjoys spending time traveling the world with her family and capturing diverse cultures and experiences through her photography. Welcome, Bindu. We're so happy to have you join us today. Is there anything that you would like to add to this amazing intro before we jump into the questions?
No, thank you. I'm very excited to be here and to answer that specific question. It's technical program management, but we do a lot of product, we do a lot of technical stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Okay, so we're going to jump into our questions for the day. Now, before we do that, the last thing I'm going to highlight here is some of the principal themes that we're going to cover in today's conversation. Now, you'll see them on the screen in front of you. One thing to know is that we drew these both from conversations with Bindu, as well as by looking at some of the questions that y'all submitted in advance of today's session. Now, something to know is that we're going to try and get to all these topics. We're going to talk a little bit about how to strategically evaluate and plan your next career move. We're going to discuss some ways that you can leverage your strengths to move forward in your career. But we're also going to talk a little bit about how growing and how to grow into and place horizontal moves, how those can be beneficial to your career as well as the non-linear career path. Now, we're going to try and cover these today, but like I said, if you took time to spend with Power to Fly and Facebook today, we want to make sure that the time you spend with us is well worth it. So to that end, just know that y'all can drive today's session. Please feel free. If you want to dig in deeper on something that Bindu has asked, please let us know. If you want to ask a question, please feel free to. If you want to, let's say we're covering one of your questions and maybe we're just not coming at it from the right angle. Let us know. Give us more details, more context. We'd love to hear from you. So like I said, please feel free to participate. I'll keep nudging you all in chat if you would like to. And with that, I say let's jump into our questions. Now, so Bindu, we had a lot of people that wrote in like a ton of questions here. But so let's kind of like start from the beginning and we'll go from there. So a lot of today's event is kind of talking more about leadership, right? Can you talk to us about some of the best ways to transfer leadership and executive experience into a field where you might have little direct experience? I think this is a very common ask for a lot of people that attend these chats. What do you think about?
Yeah, I think that's really good question to get us started, especially, right? I just want to take a step back and say, what is leadership? Let's define that a little bit, because I see people getting confused between leadership and subject matter expertise, and they're two completely different things. Leadership is you go into any space, you clearly articulate what is the problem, what are the n number of problems in that space, but prioritize, the ability to prioritize. And you will not be able to prioritize until you understand the problem, but you also understand the people you have, right? And the skill sets they bring. And then it's a matter of trying to figure out, do we have the right people to solve the right problems? And what does it even mean? What does success look like? So you need to be able to assess the situation, assess the resources you have, be very clear on the outcomes you want to drive, and then make sure you have the right people working on the right set of problems. That is leadership. And if you don't have subject matters expertise, then you need to find out and you need to get people who have that. And so it's a matter of finding the right people. Once you have that, then you just enable them, give them clarity of the mission, give them clarity on what does success look like, or work with them to define it. And then just then remove the roadblocks from their way, right? It's sometimes easier if you have the subject matter expertise. A lot of people get started in leadership through that, right? Like, I'm in a space, I understand the space, I've been working on this for a while as an IC or whatever. Suddenly I become the leader. I don't need to do extra work to understand the space. So I bring that with me. It becomes easier. But that does not mean that it's necessary to be a leader. Once you do that a couple of times, you take a step back and say, so what is it that I'm doing? How am I matching the problem to the people, the problem to the resources? All the while, it's critical to have the clear vision and the clarity in the outcome that you're looking for. Once you have that, and it's the pattern, and once you develop that muscle of thinking that way, I can to plop you from one problem to another, and then you just start repeating that pattern, right? But that assessment, that quick assessment of the 360 assessment of the problem, the outcome, the people, the resources, the skill set, that is what makes you a leader. And once you have that, then it's about working, right? The critical thing is trying to work with people to get the results you want. right? And that is just making sure they have, they are motivated. And some people are motivated through autonomy, giving them autonomy. Other people have other motivations. So understanding the people and the resources you have to utilize them efficiently and effectively, and but building that support structure, that network, that is leadership, right? Once you develop, like I said, it is a skill that you pick up and you develop like any other skill. It's a muscle you develop, and then once you have developed that pattern, then applying it in other places. But first thing under this whole thing is you need to be confident that you are a leader, that you have the skills that are necessary to do that problem. Once you believe it, you'll start operating very differently as well.
I love that. I think you're right. It's very along the lines of dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Exactly.
So yeah, starting to treat yourself like a leader, think of yourself as a leader,
Yes.
would be a huge kind of paradigm shift that would help you really achieve that. I love that. All right. So let's talk a little bit about how to talk about these nonlinear career moves. We had a lot of people that wanted to know how to stand out to employers, how to be explaining that path to hiring managers. Now, I know that you also have a similar story in your background. So could you share that with us and kind of tell us how you handled, trying to make these moves when maybe the path wasn't super clear to whoever else you were interviewing with?
Yeah, absolutely. I just let me take a step back and then explain all the multiple roles I've played. I've been a tester for but very short time. I've been an engineer for a very long time. Engineering manager, engineering leader. I've been in product. I've been a vice president. I've been an IC. I've led both product as well as technical engineering, and then I've also been a business leader. Right. But then I've made all these shifts. But the interesting thing is, with every role you take, there is a different way you look at a problem. There is a different perspective you get. Like I've done the same problem as an engineer and as a product manager. And then they both help me gain a different perspective of the problem. And so now I attack the same problem very differently. And the same with like now that you add on the business angle to it, right? So the way to think about all these lateral moves is you grow as a person, you add to your perspective, and you think differently, then you also lead differently. So now first you need to know what you're gaining from it and what your profile is like. And then you need to make sure you need to figure out a way to get that narrative out, right? Who are you? What is the unique perspective you bring? What is the unique skill set you bring? How all these things, all these moves that you've done add up to like, your 2 plus 2 adds up to like 10 rather than 4. And you need to bring out that narrative when you talk to hiring managers. But the key thing also is prep. I mean, there is no substitution to prepping. You have to prep. You have to kind of put yourself in the hiring manager's shoes and say, what is it that this person really cares about? What are their top 5 problems to solve or top 3 problems to solve? Because if you're through your narrative, if you're talking about something that is not even a problem for them, why should they care? They're not even going to connect to you, right? So a lot of times I try to put myself in their shoes and say, okay, what do they care about? What are their current problems? If I were there, how would I solve it? How do I think about it? First I need to have that conviction. How do I take that team from day one to like a different space, right? What are the unique things that I'm bringing to the team that hiring manager doesn't have already? So you need to build that story in your head. You need to have that conviction. And while going through that process, it's not just about the hiring manager, it's also about you. And if this is not the right fit because you're not adding anything, or it's not interesting, you're not the right fit, then you're not the right fit. That is, don't shoehorn yourself into some place that is not the right fit, unless you don't have any other option. But luckily, in the current environment, we have plenty of options in the tech industry. So once you have it, I've had conversations where when I'm talking very first conversation, I'm like, but how about this? But how about this? Have you thought about it? And then that person is like, oh, wow, these are the problems I'm currently thinking. If you're already thinking about these problems, I'd love for you to come and help me solve them. right? And so that is how you kind of make yourself more interesting, and then you bring in the value you bring, right? You're not going to make up value, you bring in some value. First you need to identify what that value is as it pertains to that role and that hiring manager. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, I think that sounds really, that kind of hits all the points that were most heavily asked. So if you are watching this right now, especially if this was your question, or even if it wasn't, give us a thumbs up in the chat. I see Alma is giving us a thumbs up there. And if you don't agree, let us know how you handled this. I think it's all really great if we can learn from each other here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about who the non-linear career path is afforded to. I think there's part of a misconception out there that people who have kind of paid their dues are able to do stuff like this, but maybe not people that are just starting out. One of the questions we got around this said, it's perceived that if someone holds many interests, then they might not be taken as seriously because they're seen as a jack of all trades. Now, I know this has been going around on TikTok at least for a couple of weeks, but jack of all trades, A, is not a bad thing, and B, no one ever remembers the end of that phrase, right? Jack of all trades, what is it? Jack of all trades is something about like being a jack of all trades is better than being only a master of one. A jack of all trades is a master of none, but still better than a master of one. So knowing how to do a bunch of different things is not a problem, but I'm really interested to see what you think. Do you think that it has to be some, people that can take this this opportunity are really only people who've been around for a while or established themselves in a specific industry? Or do you think that this non-linear career path is open to many more people than just that?
Yeah, it's all very contextual, right? For example, right, if I want to go build like a very traditional e-commerce company and that is my passion, and then it does not make sense for me to make a move into AI or like VR or something like that, because that does not take me any closer to my goal where my passion is. And if I want to make a move back, that doesn't add to my story there. However, if I'm very interested in something very like, being like, okay, let's say I want to go to a startup and that is my passion, right? Because for some people, working in smaller teams when something is not even established, so you go make things happen, is a passion. Then jack of all trades is actually a great thing to do, because then I say that, okay, you don't have so many people that you can develop deep multiple teams. I bring you, blah blah blah. I can do front end coding, I can do back, I can do full stack development, I can also do some product management. Hey, I have some design experience as well and UX development. Suddenly you're very marketable to them because of their needs, and there is a fit between your passion and their needs, right? So I think the first thing you want to identify is, what do you want to do? And really, what I've realized is that what do you want to do is also not a static thing, right? Like what I want to do changes as I grow as a person. So what do you want to do for your next move, and how passionate are you for that next move, and are you set up for that? Like for example, tomorrow I want to say, hey, I want to go into data science. Then I will make a lateral move that takes me closer to data science. Might not be now, but it'll take me closer towards that, right? So that is like, for example, one of the things when I moved to Zululi, I went there to build a data platform. I've never done anything in data, right? So as a career move, that didn't really make sense. But the way I thought through it is, this was like, maybe 6-7 years ago, and big data was like a big buzzword, and it seemed very interesting, but I didn't know anything about it. So I like, from like a leadership role in Microsoft, I took a IC role in Zulily because I wanted to learn the technology, because that was a passion. I wanted to understand what that is all about, because it seemed like the potential of what you can do if you understand that is huge. But because of the rest of my profile, within 6 months, I was in a leadership role again there. But I've I've developed a completely new way of thinking about it because I have that data expertise now. And so the key thing is, to realize what you want to do, and then try to plan your career or make your next moves to take you closer to what you want to do. I do have a caution story as well. When I see, like, I do a ton of recruiting, and I've done it for, like, not just Meta, but I've done it in my previous companies as well. If you see moves that don't make sense and like a constant, you're changing jobs every year, then you need to bring that narrative on what is that adding up to. Otherwise, it is a flag that says this person, they either don't know what they want or cannot stick to one thing, or they get bored too easily. So you want to avoid going there. So there has to be a method behind the madness. Forget the hiring managers, but for your own self, what you're trying to do. The other cautionary thing I would say is, any role, there is a lot you can learn from that role. That's not just getting that task done, but that there is a language as a way of thinking when you do a role. Like product management is a very different way of thinking from an engineering. You attack a problem and you think about a problem very differently. So you want to do justice when you're in a role, because you want to actually absorb and internalize and develop and grow before you make a move. Otherwise, that's wasted time. That whatever investment you already made there is wasted time. So you want to be very strategic about it and follow your passions. As long as you're passionate about the role you want to go to, that takes you more than 50% there.
I absolutely love that. We have a lot of questions coming in the chat, so I'm going to try and get to as many of those as we can. Regarding your previous answer to like how to stand out, Cynthia was asking if you have suggestions on identifying what the org or the team's actual problems might be. Is it mostly through research of the org in the news, for example, or are you supposed to, utilize different sources to get that information?
Just every source you can, right? Look up the recent news, look up their blog posts. Their blog post talk will tell you a lot, especially if you're in engineering or product. There is, or even data science these days. Their blog posts tell you what they're currently working on. And then you can see that to say, okay, so if I'm in this space, what could I be working on? What are the ask the recruiters in the phone screens or like in your initial conversations, what are your top problems? Ask to speak to the hiring manager. There is absolutely nothing wrong in asking, what are the top problems you want to solve? Right? And then just say, that is because I want to make sure I'm the right person for this role. Use LinkedIn, use your contacts, use your network. Like cold reach somebody and say, hey, people are actually very friendly. We hesitate to ask for help, but when you ask for help, people are very friendly and they're very willing to help. I have reached out to people on, through LinkedIn that I don't even know, and said, hey, I have this, like, I have a recruiter calling coming up. I would love to know if this is the right thing for me. When I think through it, I feel like these are the top things that this team will worry about. Can you help me think through that? Maybe, one out of like 5 will answer, but that's okay. And so use every single avenue you can. You always have like a contact of a contact, a friend of a friend, somebody you can get hold of. And ask those questions. And you can ask again, like the recruiters, you can ask to speak to hiring managers or somebody in the team. It doesn't have to be hiring managers. And you can also, like, I think blog posts also tell a lot about it. And then just read news.
Great. Thank you for sharing that with us. We have a lot of people asking follow-up questions. Alma especially wanted to know if you could expand a bit more around that idea of the narrative and the language around how different roles affect and influence the way you approach a problem differently. Could you give us an example of how you've broken that down to people in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me take like an example in Zululi, right? One of the things I've done at Zululi is build like a auto pricing service system at scale. And Zululi is one of the few companies that has that. Now, when we talk about auto pricing itself, the very first time you bring it up, there's a lot of people in Zululi that were not open to the idea at all. Right? So then you have to attack it in multiple ways, or you have to sell the idea in multiple ways. You have to talk about why, from a business perspective, that makes sense for the company, and then you have to talk to the engineering team on, why from an engineering perspective that makes sense. And then you have to talk to product managers on how to build that product. And so these are all, like, the way I think about it, these are all different languages you speak. And when you do these roles, you understand the language. So when a new problem comes, then you think about it as, oh, okay, so what is the business reason to do this? Why is this compelling? That's wearing your business hat. You think through that and say, okay, if I want to solve that problem, how would we build it? That is the product thinking, that you wear the product hat. Then you say, okay, so this, we want to solve that problem by building this kind of product. How is this even feasible? That is your engineering hat. And if you can do all of that thinking, then suddenly you can just solve the whole problem. I'll give you another example, and this is a personal example. Somebody, I mentor, some other people, and one of my mentees was asking, I'm not getting any pings on LinkedIn from recruiters. And my friend gets a lot more. How do I do it? Right. And my advice was, let's think about, see, at the end of the day, it is an ML model that's running in LinkedIn. I mean, I've never worked in LinkedIn, but I can, it's common sense. If you think logically, it's an ML model that runs. And then it needs to get some input, and then it needs to, then it says, oh, okay, based on blah 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 and blah, this person I think is open and it's interested, and so I'm start showing that to recruiters and showing them in the queries and stuff like that. So you can kind of reverse engineer it and say, okay, for me to be attractive and me to show up in these queries, what kind of inputs can I give to LinkedIn ecosystem? Right. And so how do I indicate interest where there is no checkbox that says I'm interested, for example, right? That is a different way of thinking. That the data way of thinking is different. And if you work on some of the data projects, then you develop that way of thinking. So then you can just reverse engineer it. Now, if I was interviewing for LinkedIn, then I can start thinking about what could be their top problems, because I understand how this ecosystem works, because I've looked at the data problems and now I've developed or absorbed the data language. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a ton of sense. We've got people chiming in the chat here. Regu had said, love that 360-degree approach of wearing multiple hats and knowing from incubation to E2E operations. So I think you're definitely striking a chord with a lot of people. So thank you for sharing that with us. All right, so let's look at some of the other questions we were asked. A lot of people wanted to know how you can kind of plan out a career path or even start to think of a career path, especially in an industry that will continue to change dramatically in the coming years. I mean, you had said so yourself, big data wasn't a thing, 10 to 15 years ago. So right. What if you are looking at a career within tech, how can you come up with, kind of a plan for the future when you have no idea what the next big thing is going to be that shifts the industry entirely?
Yeah. So I think the first starting point is to accept and embrace that change is a constant. In our current industry, if you don't believe and embrace that change is a constant, you just become outdated really fast. I mean, you can see how technology is evolving. And if I say, oh, I only know C++ or C# or whatever, then I'm outdated really fast. So embrace the fact that change is a constant, right? And go with the flow. Be curious, be passionate, be curious about what's coming, what's happening. But also know that just like the industry is changing, we also change as people, right? I didn't know that I would be interested in data. I didn't, right? And then from there, I didn't know that I would be interested in business. I was actually, when I started in engineering, I was very happy writing code. I never actually wanted to become a people manager. I thought that's a boring job, by the way. It was like, oh, you have to talk all day, and who wants to talk all day? But you evolve as a person. What you want also changes. So I would say at every time, at every point, know what you want to do. Maybe not the next move, but know the next big thing you want to do. And then work towards it. And there were times when I actually worked towards that. I achieved it. I'm like, it's not as interesting as I thought it would be. but that's okay, right? Then plan your next move. Know what you want. I know people, for them, their big motivation was earning money. They wanted some, with like, by the time I'm age X, I want to, have a net worth of Y. And they made their career moves that got them there, and that's okay, right? For some people, it's, I want to become a VP of product. that that's fine, so then you will work towards whatever gets you the closest to it. For me, it's always been, I want to solve that problem. I want to go into this new space. The things that I have not done were interesting to me. But what I realized is they looked like lateral moves, but they accelerated my vertical move, even though I didn't necessarily plan for it. Right? But know what you want and go after it. I think that would be the biggest advice I'll give. Also realize that these things change, these are fungible, and then just keep checking in with yourself. Like, I have an end of the year thing where I check in with myself and say, what do I want to do? Am I still interested? Am I still excited? Like I said, we have the luxury of going towards what we're interested in, making changes, because the tech industry is, look, right now allows us that luxury. So yeah, check in. But my other thing that I would tell people, or at least like for me, I'm a big believer in having fun. I spend most of my day working, and so I'm just going to do my best to make it fun for myself. And sometimes it's okay if I'm not moving vertically or laterally, as long as I'm having fun, and that's fine too. So know what you want and know that it changes.
I love that idea of flexibility. So when you're trying to come up with this idea of what you want, or when you're checking back in to see, if you need to maybe reconfigure your plans or your action items at this point, should people be aiming for vertical movement but willing to accept lateral moves as a less favorable placeholder? Or do you think there's a different way we should be thinking about lateral moves in general?
Yeah. So the one thing I would highly recommend, regarding everything we talked about so far, is getting mentors. Ask people to mentor, because just going and talking to mentors itself is a check-in. It's a forced check-in, and other people can have a different perspective than you have when you are in a problem. And it's invaluable to get their help and to get their perspective on how you're doing, and and to get clarity. So that said, the whole lateral versus vertical, that is very interesting. I've known people who plan vertical, who said, I want to be a general manager, and I'm going to work towards that. And sometimes they needed to make horizontal moves to get to the vertical. And let me give you an example. I was listening to a podcast about women leaders, and there's this one woman leader, in, I think, GM. What she did was, she had a vertical role in her mind. That was her goal. Then she had mentors. She was brainstorming with them, and then she looked at the history of all the people that that did that role in the company, and she realized that literally every one of them played an international role before they became a GM. The international role itself is horizontal. It's a lateral role. It's not vertical at all. So she's like, well, if everybody did that, there seems to be a pattern there, so I'm just going to go do that. She took that role, but what she realized is, even though it looked like a lateral one, that move gave her several things that helped her get to the vertical, and she did. She got new sponsors, and that adds to the number of sponsors she already had in the company. She developed new ways to appreciate business, because international brings in its own constraints. She developed new ways to lead, because again, the culture is different, the language is different, everything was different. And she had newer exposure to business that she didn't have before. So what that did was that just well-rounded and gave her newer skills, and accelerated her move to vertical. So it's the vertical and lateral, they are not disconnected. It's all about the skill set you will develop. And so identifying where you want to go, identifying what you need to get there, and that's opportunity, that's skill set, That's visibility, your own drive, but that's also sponsors. You need to have sponsors, especially after a particular level, leadership levels, sponsors become key. So identify what you need and figure out how to get there. And sometimes it's a role nobody wants to take and you take one for the team. Somebody will sit up and take notice of that, right? Now there are stuff that you need to avoid as well. There's some lateral moves where you'll get completely sidelined, where you are out of the daily conversation, and then it's just harder to get in, right? So identify the pitfalls. Try to see, like, am I going, is it a trap for me, is it a pitfall and I should just not do? And if you're still going to do it, then negotiate and say, I'm doing this because of blah blah blah. This means that I need to have a seat at the table. Otherwise, this role is not interesting. I think you need to demand, you need to, well, don't demand, but negotiate and stand up for what you want, have clarity in what you want, ask for what you want. You'll be surprised at how often you will get, more than you thought you would, especially if you just stand up and ask.
Okay. Now we have a couple people in the comments section here asking questions. Could you differentiate between the idea of a sponsor versus a mentor?
Yes. So mentor is somebody that you can brainstorm with, that has experience, that says, oh, do this or do that. Have you thought about it? It's like a coach, right? They don't even have to be in your company. They can they can be in the industry, or they can just be like, they are a really good leader, although they're not in the same industry, but they have a leadership way of thinking that you are trying to develop. So sometimes you can you can identify certain skills as weaknesses or gaps or areas for improvement for yourself, and you can get a mentor or a coach who's really strong there. Sponsor is something you need in your company. If you're trying to make a vertical move, if you're trying to become a director, a VP, a principal, a lead, you want people to sponsor you. And this becomes more important as you go to higher levels. With sponsors are nothing but people who believe in you, who see your skill set, who know what you bring to the table, who believe in you, and who are willing to invest in you. So they need to be in your environment. Whereas a mentor is like a coach, and they don't have to be in your environment. Sometimes it's actually better that they're not, because then they are not clouded by the current context.
Awesome. Thank you so much for specifying that. I think it's one of those things that once you hear it explained, you're like, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. But just hearing the terms, it can be really difficult to try and determine, like, wait, am I approaching this person as a sponsor or as a mentor? So thank you for that.
A lot of times people get them both confused. And you cannot have your sponsors be your mentors, because sometimes I want to go to my mentor and say, I'm really bad at this. And I might not want to do it with my sponsor, because I'm trying to take this is how I bring value to your team. This is why you need to invest in me. And so there's different conversations.
Sharon's asking, is it okay to ask your manager to be your sponsor?
I would sometimes, but I wouldn't ask like that, right? Because the idea is, if your manager, if he or she is a good manager, they should already be your sponsor. I would ask somebody else who's influential, who's considered to be a leader. Not doesn't have to be through title, but they're considered to be a leader. They are influencers, and they can see, they understand people, they understand the hidden subtext, they get the nuance, and they can guide you, right? And so why would you ask your manager? It's expected that they are your sponsor. And if your manager is not your sponsor, then there's a lack of trust in that relationship.
Thank you for diving into that with us. We do have a ton of people in the questions asking on suggestions of how to ask someone, how to approach somebody. I'm going to dig in once Bindu's talking about our next question. I'll dig into our archives and throw some chats out here so that y'all can get more information on mentorship and tips and tricks on ways to proceed with that. All right. One of the really good questions we were asked was weighing up the value of a lateral move versus a functional or vertical traditional career progression. How do you suggest people evaluate when they are looking at different options or different opportunities in their careers?
Yeah, that is something I see people struggle with. But every time when I'm mentoring someone, I see them struggle because they don't have clarity on what they want. Right? It could be that they want to become a leader in their org, they want to become a vice president, they want to become a director, they want to become a people manager, but they don't know what it is that they need to develop or show to make a case to get there. And so when you don't have that clarity, then you don't know and you can't evaluate if a lateral move will take you closer to your goal or farther away from your goal. Right? And that is when it's confusing. And so that is when I would recommend you figure out what you need to do to get that clarity. And it can be, mentors, coaches, they are great for things like that, right? Because it's hard to do self reflection and get that clarity, but you talk to like 3 4 people, and they listen to the questions they're asking, and then they will reflect back what they're hearing from you. Once you get clarity, and let's say that you are trying to grow towards a people management role, and the lateral move is a depth role somewhere else. There's a potential opportunity for people management in one place, but the lateral move will take you away from it. Then why would you want to take that role? Right? But let's say there is no opportunity for people management in your current one. There's a potential opportunity coming up in a different team, and you make a lateral move to that team, then you build a trusted relationship with people there. That takes you closer to people management role. So it's all about really, what do you want to do? And then trying to figure out what are your gaps, where are the opportunities. So I feel like I keep coming back to that point, but without that it's very hard, and it's confusing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, we had a lot of people, and by the way, y'all, we only have about 15 minutes left in today's session. I know this always goes really quickly, so if you have questions for Bindu, make sure you ask them. Throw them up into the group chat. You can also DM them to me, and I'll be happy to raise them and keep you anonymous. We had a lot of people that wanted to know how to handle things like being overqualified in one way but underqualified in another while you're making either a lateral move or an industry shift. A lot of people had questions about how to gain that industry experience if you can't get a job in that industry. Do you have any thoughts on this? Any thoughts on how to either how to gain that experience that you need even before you can get into the career field, or about ways to kind of evaluate and figure out where you need to upskill?
The overqualified one I see quite a bit. I've done that. When I went to take the data role, I was way overqualified for that role. However, I was very clear with myself that I want to understand what it means to think in the data language. And so I was very clear with myself on why I'm taking that role. So I had a lot of people ask me like, oh, but why are you doing it? That's like 2 steps or 3 steps down. But as long as I have clarity, I know why I'm doing it. Right? But what happened was the moment I filled in that gap, I was like a leader there really fast before I realized it and before I made any moves to it. I see a lot of people do that when they go to a newer space. A lot of times, people go in as an IC, because what that does is it helps you very easily and without any distractions develop expertise in that space. So for that role, to be a leader in that role, you have a gap, and you make a move that's very quickly helps you close that gap. And now you are, since because of your profile and the well-roundedness of your profile, you have a very strong case for a leadership role there, because now you don't have a gap in the subject matter expertise in that area. Right? So I see a lot of people do that. I've done that. I've made several moves like within Microsoft or outside, where every time I shifted, I went as an IC, and then before I know it, I'm a leader there. The other one is, if you don't have expertise, how do you? I think your second question was, how do you develop expertise? You can do what I did. You jump in, you take like a couple of steps down just to develop that expertise. Or there are like courses, there are projects, there are several other companies that are accelerator kind of things, where you can go in and then you can just develop that expertise.
Okay. We've got a question from QTS in the chat. What are your thoughts on exploring different career paths, technical versus project or program? Is trying to get into those roles the way to go, or is it better to have conversations with other people who are already in those roles to better understand them?
So I just want to add one thing to the previous question, which is some of the companies have rotational programs. Like I know Meta has rotational program and some of the bigger companies. That is a great way to get exposure to somewhere that you're curious about. And then if you're interested, then you develop that expertise. So I just wanted to, I know if you have that opportunity, take it. I think that's a wonderful opportunity that some of the companies provide. So coming back to, sorry, what was the question again?
That's okay. They wanted to know, is it better to have conversations with people who are in the roles you're looking at joining, or to try and get into them yourself so that you can gain that hands-on experience to know if you really suit it?
I see. Why would you, let me ask you this. Why would you ever do any move without having a full information when it's readily available? Right, like that is that 360 view of something. If you know somebody that's working in the space that you're kind of curious about and potentially interested, why would you not go talk to them? Because talking to people who are living in that ground reality will give you an idea of what the world there is like. But I wouldn't but it's still one data point. It's not the whole story, because everybody's reality is a little different. Let's say the person you're talking to is not doing well and is not able to perform to what that role needs. Their experience is very different, right? And so you do not want to just take that as gospel, but you want to take it as one data point. If you can talk to multiple people, if you can talk to the roles stakeholders, because they give you a different view of it. So I would say anytime you want to make any move, gather as much information as you can and treat them all as data points and then evaluate. And a lot of times, even with all of that, unless you jump in, you might not know. Again, then you try to do a risk analysis. What is my risk if I jump in? And what is the benefit I'm getting? My risk is maybe, it'll take me 6 months to a year to understand if this is what I really want. So the worst thing that will happen is at the end of the year, I come back to my current role-ish. Is that something, a risk that I can live with or not? I think you always have to gather data, do your risk analysis, the cost benefit analysis, and then decide.
Thank you for diving in on that. Let's see. We had a lot of people want to know about building technical knowledge versus developing those people skills. And it seems like a lot of people understand like where they need to go to get technical knowledge and where you can, get that, kind of get your whistle wet with, a certain topic for free versus, going into classes on something. Do you have any suggestions on how to develop those people skills, especially in a field like IT and like tech, where it's not always, shall we say, stereotypically, it's not always populated by people with great soft skills?
Yeah. So the one key thing, whether it's this question or a different question, is the growth mindset and always learning, right? Like I consider that, I want to always be learning. In which case, like I'm learning from Meg, the way you're asking this question and the way you're kind of direct in this conversation, there is a lot that I can learn from. Because I bet you if I do the job you're doing today, I will not do it as well or not nearly as well as, right? Not even close. So for me, it's the world is a classroom. I'm always learning. People management or just leadership, I have tons of examples around me. So I'm always watching to see what's working, what's not, what's resonating, what's not. When two people say the same thing to like an audience of 10 or 20 or whatever, one lands more effectively than the other. And I'm always watching to see why. What is it that this person is saying that's more effective than this person? Coding is like, it's constant. It's not that different between you and me, as long as we have certain basic skills. But The leadership, people management, just one aspect of it. It's very different. And so now you have umpteen examples to learn from. And you want to know what's working, what's not just to you, but what to others. The other thing is, and this is one thing that people don't get usually, is I consider different techniques as tools in a toolbox. You want to have a well-rounded toolbox. You're not going to use a screwdriver for every, or a hammer for every situation. So there are times where you use different techniques based on the context, and all of them, you should think about them as tools in your toolbox. Like if I'm managing people and if I have a 10 people team, I'm not going to do the same thing or a same way of managing or supporting all my 10 people. Same with my peers that I work with. It's all contextual, and it all depends on the person, the context, the problem, and what we need to do. I'm a very even keeled person, but there are times where coming across stronger is the right tool to use. I don't like it, but I will use it if it's necessary. And a lot of times where you see people to be very effective, their volume goes down, which is non-intuitive. And sometimes, that commands the room more and gets attention. That's another tool. Empathy. You always want to have empathy. That is like, there are some basic tools you want to have. You want to have empathy for the people that you're working with, whether you're managing them, whether they're your customer, whether they're your manager, right? Because you want to understand where they're coming from, what their problems are. So there's like certain basic things you need, and then the rest are like tools. And you want to make sure you have all the tools and you know which tool to use when. But the best way, at least that works for me, is just observe and learn. Of course, there's also classes and there's also books. There's like some amazing books about people management, about leadership, about management in general. And these are all data points, and then you develop your own style. But also learn from yourself. Like in a conversation, like if this was live, then I could have gotten more out of, oh, this is working and this is not just landing. It's harder remote. But you also have to learn from yourself.
Yep, I absolutely second that. And to be frank, you could probably do this job. You're a very, very good interviewer. But I totally get what you mean, right? Different people are going to approach a job completely differently. And one might land better than the other. It might be kind of a toss up. One person might be able to speak to half the room and the other one carries the other half.
Yes.
So yeah, thank you for pointing that out there, because you're right. It's just about what skills you train and kind of cultivate in yourself.
Yep.
And I absolutely second asking people. It's one of my favorite things to do, is to, especially if I see somebody do something, I'm like, oh my God, how did you do that? How did you bring that great energy? Or how did you, encourage people to participate like that? How did you learn how to do that? So yeah, I completely second.
The other thing is like presentations. It's very similar with presentations. I'm always watching on when people present and say, oh, what's working? This part, I'm actually paying attention. I'm notorious for I lose attention. Half hour is too much for me, for example. So if somebody can grab my interest, then I want to know what they're doing, because I want to learn that.
Yeah, for sure. And just to touch on that, I know, because we had a lot of people that were asking questions about, kind of how to tell that story and how to acknowledge whatever your throughway is for your career shifts and that kind of stuff. We are having another chat room tomorrow on storytelling and how to leverage the art of storytelling within presentations, especially. So definitely sign up for that if you haven't yet. It's happening tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. So definitely check that out if you haven't registered yet. All right, so we only have about 6 minutes left. I want to make sure we touch a little bit more on Meta, formerly Facebook, as well as kind of what your experiences have been there. So the screen that y'all are seeing in front of you is some questions that we asked Bindu prior to today's session. Sorry, my dog is going nuts outside. And one of the things you talked about was you described the company culture as self-driven. Can you expand on that for us?
Yeah, so I heard about this before, but I didn't really internalize it till I actually came to Meta. And what I heard was it's a very bottoms-up culture, and I'm like, okay, that can mean anything. But what I realized coming here is individual teams, every team, they live and breathe the customer and the product. I'm very used to information flowing down and then trying to, things coming up, or like, during planning, for example, goals going down and then some more things flowing back up with like more detail. But here it's individual teams that say, okay, this is my overall goal. I want to grow e-commerce. I want to grow e-commerce for this sellers and this buyers. And so that is like literally their brief. And then they come up with ideas. They say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. These are all the experiments we'll run. And then we'll see how things go. If things are going well, if it's resonating for our customers, then we'll do more of it. It's really let the customers tell us. But the teams are self-driven. They drive the products and they also drive the careers. Like my manager doesn't tell me, this is your role. There is no definition for my role. I have to come in. I'm expected to look at the team, look at the customers, look at my product, and say, okay, how am I making my team, solving customer problems? How am I impacting my customers? How am I making my team better? How am I making my org better? So I have to define it. I have to say, this is what I want to do, and then this is what I did. And so that is self-driven and autonomy. That is just wonderful. I have not worked in this model to this extent before, and I think it's wonderful.
All right, so let's talk about your tips for someone who's interviewing. I know especially people that want to interview with Meta or with Facebook and some of your different, departments and different silos. It can be drastically different. What your advice would be, but basically, generally speaking, what tips or what advice would you give to someone who's interviewing?
Prep. There is prep as much as you can, talk to as many people as you can. There are so many resources available. By the way, recruiters are your friends, because recruiters, they're motivated. They want you to be hired. They are acting on your behalf. They are your friend. And so things start thinking like a recruiter is your resource, your best resource and your friend. Especially in Meta, we even tell candidates the kind of loops that we will do. And then also what are we looking for in each other loops, and we provide resources to prep. I was amazed when I interviewed on it, like, oh, I've never seen this before. These resources, they'll tell you exactly in each loop, this is what we look for. So you already know what is the outcome of each, right? What is the desired outcome for each? So then you work backwards to figure out how to prep. They also give you examples. Recruiting team, I know, does mock interviews. I know I have done mock interviews, so for candidates, and we do that all the time. And we have like Casey and Samantha, and they can give you more information as well. But I also know that there's tons of information on YouTube, on like blogs. There is like, if you any role in Facebook, I know for sure you have information. Some of them is paid, a lot of them is free. Just leverage it, use it. My thing is, if you're making an effort, go all in. Don't make a half-hearted attempt. So just go go all in, prep really, really well. But start with the outcome. These are the things that they're looking for. What do I have that gives them what they're looking for? And then, of course, they have to evaluate and say, what you are showing, does it meet the bar, and blah, blah, blah. But you want to have a targeted conversation. So work backwards from what they're looking for. And recruiters help you, and they give you information on what it is that they're looking for.
Excellent. All right. So I know that we have about a minute left. So while I'm doing our thank yous and wrap ups, I'm going to leave some information in the group chat here. This is a list of some of the TPM roles as well as PM roles that Facebook is looking to fill, or sorry, Meta, formerly Facebook, is looking to fill. So I'm putting them in there. It's a bunch of links, so please feel free to click through or save copy this down, since obviously the chat will disappear at the end of today's session. But I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Bindu. I know that there's a lot of prep work that goes into these, not just the hour that you see in front of you. But I just want to say a big thank you to for taking the time to share with us, to be here and share so much and be so transparent. It's very, very helpful and very impactful for our community. And just thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experience with us.
Thank you, Meg. I really enjoyed talking to you. It felt like a conversation rather than like a presentation or something. And also, thank you for all the questions. I think they were really good questions.
Weren't they great?
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
And so sorry to anybody if you asked a question we didn't get to you. All the questions have been recorded, so hopefully Facebook will be able to go back and review some of these. But thank you again so much to our many amazing participants. You guys pulled out all the stops for this. It was amazing. So anyway, hopefully we will see many more of you join us on events we have coming up in the future. Don't forget, we've got that chat and learn on leveraging storytelling tomorrow at 3 p.m. So hopefully we'll see many more of you around for those. Hopefully that, in case we don't see you, I wish everybody a great, safe, happy, and healthy week. And hopefully we'll see you around soon. Bye, everybody.
And thank you.